With the recent promotion of surf lifesaving and some excellent carnivals, the movement is showing signs of a growth in numbers, and clubs such as Cooks Hill are quoting more than a 20% increase in registrations. And even the old-timers are coming out of retirement to rejoin their clubs, with the March Past now a deadly serious event. Today it was the much-vaunted Redhead team that saluted the judges in the best manner to take the March Past. The open boat was a close tussle right from the outset, with the 6 crews making a flying start in less than mountainous surf. Merryweather was away well, as was Redhead, Caves Beach and Newcastle. Around the Cairns it was still anyone's race, with Redhead just a touch in front, and they were able to maintain that lead all the way to the beach to record an excellent victory from the fast-finishing Caves Beach, and Newcastle filled 3rd position. The Open Ironman was a battle of the young guns, and it was a chance for Matthew Rees to continue his fine form. Rees was first out of the water, along with swim specialist Scott Mason of Newcastle. Just behind those two was another Swansea Belmont surf lifesaver, Nat McGregor. But Rees powered away to a 50-metre lead in the ski section of the race, and he began to stamp his authority on the rest of the field, who were feeling the pinch. And it was a matter of being technically correct on the board leg rather than brute strength that saw Matthew Rees emerge as a fine winner of the Ironman event from his clubmate Nat McGregor, with Scott Martin in 3rd position. The semi-final of the women's proved to be a training run for the Central Coast team as they steamrolled their way to a 10-1 win over Raymond Terrace. The final was a great tussle, with the favourite Sydney University finding it hard to curb the game Central Coast side. The Coast scored first, and then Uni replied immediately. At half-time it was 3-3, with the toughness of the match taking its toll. The Coast continued to apply the pressure and tied the scores at 5-5. Then Australian representative Debbie Wilson used her experience to help Uni grab the vital goal, and they were home 6-5. Raymond Terrace in the white and Balmain had a ding-dong battle in the first of the men's semis, with having fun more the order of the day than serious water polo. Balmain got out to a 2-0 lead before the Terrace hit back, but the Tigers hung on to win 4-3. University were odds-on favourites to beat Cronulla in the other semi, and the way they started, it looked as though it was going to be a one-horse race. But the Sharks hit back and with vocal crowd support fought back to get within touch of the Sydney champions. Uni prevailed, however, and met Balmain in the final. At half-time it was 5-5, full-time 9-9, and after 2 periods of extra time, Sydney Uni triumphed 12-11.
Every year the Lord Mayor outlines his vision for the city. Since the earthquake, his speech has had special significance. Although the Lord Mayor says in recent times he has become impatient with the lack of repair work, he believes much has been achieved during the year. More than 31,000 houses have been repaired and 2,500 commercial buildings rebuilt. The Disaster Recovery Centre has assisted about 1,600 individuals and families, while the Lord Mayor's earthquake appeal has helped more than 1,400 people. However, the Lord Mayor says only 60% of what needs to be done has been done. At the end of last year, $390 million had been handed out by insurance companies for earthquake repair. That means more than $1 million a day has been spent on rebuilding. But while the Lord Mayor believes the money pouring into the city puts it in a good position to weather the recession, he remains pessimistic about the recovery of the region's shipbuilder.
Well, I've got to be realistic. In the time frame, I think it's a less than 50-50 chance of doing anything to save the slipway as it stands.
Department of Agriculture inspectors on the trail of a noxious pest. 30 kilometres northeast of Scone, they've found a patch of Devil's Rope prickly pear, in some places 3 metres high and 5 metres deep. Devil's Rope is in a family of 800 cacti and is one of 10 declared illegal by the government. The inspectors say if prickly pear gets away, it could ruin Australian agriculture.
It would mean devastation.
This country we're on here is Crown land, and although we're kilometres away from farming properties, the pear still represents a major threat. The reason being the Pages River.
A flood would pick up pieces, transport downstream, drop it off on the hunter. No time at all you would have this pair all over the hunter.
Birdlife can also carry the seeds. The department is using tiny insects to eat away the problem. Cochineal and mealybugs are grown in captivity on the pear, then released into the crop. A chainsaw finishes the job. Within 2 months, this patch should be wiped out. Inspectors carry out regular checks of the region. If farmers want insects to control prickly pear outbreaks on their properties, they should contact the Department of Agriculture. Peter Ryan, NBN News. Students were lining up for 1991 enrolments today, but it wasn't just academic, but also political issues which were on their minds. In a shock statement, Vice-Chancellor Keith Morgan ordered the university's internal auditors to look at financial matters of the Student Council, saying he'd been approached by students and the Dean of Students over cash flow issues. It's believed a sum of more than $14,000 is involved. A spokesperson from the Representative Council admitted there were problems, but would comment no further. Late this afternoon, a student meeting was called to try and provide some answers. Information from that meeting has not been made public. Vice-Chancellor Morgan said he would act no further until results from the internal audit were available. That's expected later this week. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Newcastle University's Great Hall was awash with a sea of unexpected first-year students. The acceptance rate for some courses has more than doubled since last year, and a record number of applicants are now enrolled.
It's been a double-barrel thing. Firstly, following the expectation of people for acceptances from the offers, the acceptance increased and now the enrolments have gone over what we expected.
It's usual for the university to make far more offers than it actually has positions to fill. What it didn't take into account was the effect of a recessed economy.
Well, I want to further my education, and besides, you can't get anywhere these days without a degree.
Well, I tried lobbing straight into the workforce and I've been out of work for 2 years, so I thought uni was my best option.
If I don't, what else will I do?
Faculties now enjoying an unprecedented degree of popularity include arts, where the acceptance rate has risen from an average of 45 to 91%, English history 52 to 71, commerce 68 to 82%, and computer engineering, where acceptances are up from 65 to 84%. What this all means is hundreds of first-year students the university wasn't expecting.
Tutorials have got to be organised, and that's where the greatest stress is going to be, because they're broken up into small groups, and normally they have part-time staff involved in that, and it means they've got to seek extra part-time staff, and sometimes those people aren't readily available.
The sudden influx will also have another effect, pushing cut-off marks up and making it more difficult for future students to gain a place at the university. Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
This was the meeting that started the Victims of Crime organisation in the Hunter region last year. Around 100 people protesting against the early release of the Glessick brothers, who were charged with murdering a policeman at Toronto 14 years ago. 2 months after the meeting, Nolene Tsoulis and Dawn Gilbert called a public gathering at Beresfield. From there, support for the group has grown. Last week, a national body was formed in Melbourne, incorporating groups from New Zealand. The group's primary aim is to give support to the victims of violent crimes. Not an easy task, but one which needs to be done.
There's a lot of problems that's to be overcome from the time that the crime's committed and the policeman suddenly comes into your house and tells you what's happened. They just walked away from the scene because really they didn't have the time or the facilities to deal with us.
With the help of local police like Sergeant Paul Baker and Gary Collis, the Hunter Group is working to change that.
Police are working on a package now, a training package to help the police. We were never taught before really how to talk to victims of crime. Victimology, if you would like, it was never included in our curriculum at the academy, and it's most important that the first contact with victims is usually from a police officer. It's very important that they do and say the right thing at the right time.
Training, though, is not limited to police. From next week, members of the Hunter Group will be given advice in counselling. One of the problems facing victims is the complications which exist in the legal process and understanding what's involved in a police investigation.
The primary aim at the moment is a self-help group with the victims. They will go out into the community, or if people come to us, they can go to them and they can at least sit down and say, we know what you're going through because we've been through it, we know how you feel, and we can basically tell you probably how the thing's going to go and how you will feel in future, and it's easier for a victim to talk to a victim.
Unfortunately, that political pipe dream didn't come true. If it had, these people wouldn't need to be here. Child poverty still exists, and with it a myriad of health problems. So these 50 social and medical professionals have gathered at Newcastle University to find answers to some crucial questions.
We know what services they need. We know that it's either immunisation or it might be nutrition. We kind of know the problems, but we're not very good at actually getting them across to the people most in need.
Despite Mr Hawke's hollow election promise, the workshop is anything but a government-bashing exercise. It was initiated by the Department of Community Services and Health, and Minister Brian Howe is expected to act decisively on its recommendations.
Our recommendations, we hope, and it's the Minister's intention, that they will be a guide to policy development and the research policies of his department over the next, say, 4 or 5 years.
The workshop concludes tomorrow.
Pam Dean-Jones has just returned from England with news of the international link-up. Its benefits will be great, both for the wildlife that relies on the wetlands for survival and also for more than 10,000 school children who spend study days at the centre each year.
We'll all have access to an enormous amount of information, and then secondly, we'll be using some of the funding that BP has provided to prepare new educational packages that can be used in any centre worldwide.
The grant of $70,000 for 3 years comes from BP and promises to aid the expansion of the 63-hectare site that was established in 1986. As the third largest centre of nearly 30 worldwide, facilities here will be improved, including new walking trails through Hexham Swamp. Shortland will become the Australian and possibly the Asian resource base.
In Australia there are 10 centres, I think, at the moment, and this one would be perhaps the most successful of those, especially of the ones that are run by conservation groups rather than are government funded.
The Shell tanker had just had its 4 containers refilled in Newcastle with 11,000 litres of petrol and 10,000 of diesel. But on the way to a round of deliveries in Curry, the vehicle flipped over.
Well, I was just coming down the road here behind the petrol tanker there, and it looked like something underneath might have collapsed because it just started tipping up and he started braking and it just flipped over.
Despite the cab doors being jammed shut, the Shell driver escaped with only cuts and bruises.
Well, he come rolling out through the front windscreen when he undone his seatbelt, so I raced over to help him, but he said he was right, so we just raced back here out of the way.
Also escaping was diesel and petrol, but the spill was quickly contained by rescue services. There was no way to stop the flow. Police and firemen could only wait until fuel could be transferred to another tanker. Rebecca Skinner, NBN News.
It's thought the boulder tumbled down the embankment sometime after 11 o'clock last night. Another motorist avoided the obstacle and alerted police on a car phone at about 11:40. Before he could return to the site to warn oncoming drivers, the ACT-registered Land Cruiser slammed into the boulder at full speed. A family of 4 was on board. The father, Carl Russell, was in the passenger seat when the car collided with the rock and flipped onto its roof. He died before rescuers could free him. His wife, 37-year-old Kerry Russell, suffered chest fractures and facial cuts. She was airlifted to Royal Newcastle Hospital. Their 2 children, Cameron 8 and Kelly 4, suffered minor injuries. Police have put the incident down to a bizarre fluke. Investigators say no one could have predicted that the boulder, measuring more than 2.5 metres, would fall onto the road. Only fragments of the 2.5-tonne boulder responsible for last night's tragedy are still on the scene, and the road is once again open to traffic. However, it's hard to ignore several similar-sized boulders still hanging precariously over the cutting. An RTA expert examined the site today. It's one of several cuttings through the hills subject to rock falls. In some areas, the walls of cuttings have been pinned and sprayed with concrete, but at the scene of last night's crash, only a wire fence prevents rubble falling onto the road. An RTA spokesman said it wasn't decided whether a more effective barricade would be erected or if the site would undergo further landscaping. Last night's fatality is the 3rd on the same stretch of highway in 24 hours. 2 truck drivers died late on Wednesday night when their vehicles collided head-on about 15 kilometres north of Singleton on the Bayswater Creek Bridge. It's believed one of the drivers went to sleep at the wheel. Tom Hilston, NBN News. Police called a fire brigade hazardous chemicals unit to the scene of the spill, but only traces of the fine sand remained on the roadside. Most had been cleared away by workers associated with the company responsible. The dust was reported to police by a concerned bike rider who was showered with the material as he rode home.
I've been riding down the bloody highway, this cloud of dust into my face, so obviously I've been breathing it in as I've been going down. I put my head down and I looked up and it had radioactive LDS, and I thought, you know, what the bloody hell's going on here?
Police said the sand was a consignment of monazite being trucked to a warehouse owned by RZ Mines at Wickham. While the sand is radioactive, fire brigade experts say it poses no more danger than the phosphorus in a box of matches. Nevertheless, they wouldn't advise inhaling the sand.
The men would have been wearing breathing apparatus handling the substance.
The hapless victim was taken to hospital for a checkup. Before he left the scene, he was feeling reassured.
Well, they want to go and check me out just at the hospital because I have ingested some of it, and just to make sure I'm okay. But from what I understand, it's not too serious. Well, I hope it's not serious anyway.
Clouds of smoke blackening the sky above burning oil fields in Kuwait highlights an environmental issue which is affecting every nation in the world. Speaking at a forum in Newcastle, former CSIRO research scientist and now coordinator of the Australian Conservation Foundation's Global Change Program, Dr. Mark Diesendorf, said the burning of fossil fuels must be stopped and the Hunter's coal industry should be reviewing its future.
We need to be planning for those who work in the industry, for their children not to be working in the industry, but to be working manufacturing energy efficient appliances and buildings and wind generators and solar collectors and so on, where there are far more jobs.
Dr. Diesendorf says consumers should demand energy efficient products.
The oil industry and the coal industry and the motor industry are very reluctant to make any changes. So I think it has to come from the community.
Don McEwen and Bob Brewer fought tooth and nail last night in the final round of the Super Sedan Masters at the Motordrome. Brewer cleared away in the first few laps, but then drama. On the restart, it was McEwen who grabbed the lead, and Brewer never really mounted a serious challenge, and in his return season, McEwen was home with the spoils of victory. The stock cars supplied the real highlights with 3 tumbles but no injuries.
Go, over it goes, the 71 car, bang, cleaned up in the tail end by the 56.
And at the Barley Ranch Raceway north of Raymond Terrace, 115 riders and passengers competed in 51 events. In the Speedway Sidecar Championship, it was a win for Sydney-sider Steve Azzopardi from Singleton's Doc Fulp and Maitland's Grant Bond. Chris Watson was once again head and shoulders above his contemporaries, winning the Dirt Track Sliders crown from Tony Primmer of Walls End and Dave Stevens of the Raymond Terrace Club. In the motocross section, junior Nigel Arnold rode brilliantly to defeat Gary Purtell and Tony Hyde, while in the long track sidecar titles, it was Ian Robinson from Shane Haggerty and Matthew Poole. Rob Brown, sailing Prudential, has made a clean sweep of the Foster's 18-foot skiff challenge on Newcastle Harbour this weekend. Going into today's final 2 races, Prudential had won 4 races from 4 starts, and he capped off his stunning performance to finish with 2 victories today and finished with 120 points. Double AMI, sailed by Julian Bethwaite, again performed well for a second and a third to complete the championship on 75 points and in second place at this regatta. Dave Cummins skippered Remington Pitney Bowes to a second in race 6 to finish third overall on 67, and Phil Barnett Xerox, with a third in race 5, finished 4th with 55 points. The Cohiba Bowling Club team of skipper Sam Lagusa, Andrew Smith, Tony Zermack and Lee Greg Sattler were far too good for the Belmont team of Robert Doust, Neville Kemberley, Tom Green and Warren Rees to win the District 4's championship at Warners Bay today. Playing in the blue shirts, Lagusa's boys led 8-1 after 6 ends, 17-2 after 12, 22-2 after 15, and with 21 ends completed, Bob Douse conceded victory to Lagusa with a scoreline of 24-8. Greg Sattler played brilliantly from lead for Cohiba, and they were never in any trouble after their tremendous start.
The Bicentennial Yacht Race was to be a major event of 1988, but shortly after leaving Sydney, the fleet encountered huge seas and quickly got into trouble. Several yachts set off distress signals near Port Stephens. During a nightmarish ordeal, police boat Sea Eagle and launch Stackpool answered the calls at considerable risk to their crews. During this operation, the Sea Eagle ran into trouble itself and sank. The 3 police on board were rescued by a fishing vessel. Today, senior police were on hand to see all crew members and rescuers receive the Toyota Award for bravery. Sea Eagle skipper Dave Beddoes spoke on behalf of the officers.
As you know, in this job, it's quite easy to get a bit of a kick in the bum for some little thing you do. It's nice to receive an award of this nature.
Assistant Commissioner Charlie Parsons had high praise for the Water Police.
These fellows carried out a tenacious, determined and meritorious duty, the same as they have been doing for a long, long time.
The loss of the Sea Eagle and the conduct of the Around Australia yacht race, in which one sailor died, is still the subject of several inquiries. One, carried out by the Police and Emergency Services Backbench Committee, accepted advice from Water Police officers that the existing fleet of recently purchased fiberglass-hulled vessels couldn't handle the rigours of rescues in heavy seas. The report observed that the elderly steel-hulled police-launched Stackpool had performed well in heavy seas during the rescue and should be brought back from Sydney, where it was patrolling the harbour, to replace the fiberglass-hulled Intrepid in Newcastle. That report was made public more than 6 months ago, and yet the police-launched Stackpool remains in Sydney, where we're told it's undergoing a refit. In the meantime, if police at Newcastle are confronted by a storm situation like that in 1988, they'll have no choice but to take their chances in the Intrepid.